Micropayments actually work. Welcome everyone to episode 43 of the Value for Value podcast. My name is Kyrin, host of the Mere Mortals podcasts, and also this one. And this is the show for digital content creators who want to connect more deeply with their audience and also be able to earn a living at the same time. Man, got to get that out. I want to just reiterate here that I am live on a Wednesday, 10 a.m. at UTC plus 10, which is the equivalent of the boundary between a Tuesday, Wednesday, midnight at UTC 0. So easy way of thinking of this is wherever you are in the world, if you're in a plus zone, just add on those plus hours onto that Tuesday midnight, or if you're in a minus zone, take it away and you'll know exactly where you are. And if you can listen live to it, I would really appreciate you joining in as well. Let's dive straight into the topic for this week because I've got a fair few things to talk about, and this is all about micropayments. So in the past couple of episodes, we've really been focusing on the podcasts themselves. We're looking at lit, we're looking at the four properties, what is a podcast, emergence of podcasting 2.0. And I kind of promised, okay, this is what's going to be one of the things that has emerged from podcasting 2.0, and this is the value tag. And I want to explain how this works with the RSS feed, and we're going to really be focusing on the micropayment aspect of it for this time. So first of all, I hope we all know what an RSS feed is. This is where your podcast is kind of hosted, I guess. This is the directions for podcasting apps to be able to see, okay, this is where the audio files are located. This is the descriptions they want, a real source of information and how to display what it is that you're trying to display in a, mostly an audio format for podcasting, but blogs use RSS as well. And we'll touch upon that in a little bit of a later section. So what the value tag is it's essentially a way for you to put in a wallet and for people to pay you directly without permission, without any strings attached. And we were talking about the permissionless aspect of Bitcoin and of the RSS and podcasting. So what this does is it's really cool because you can just put something in, it's there in your feed. You don't have to be changing it for all of the different currencies and bank accounts of the world. There was really no way to do this in podcasting before podcasting 2.0 came along and allowed this. So in this case, we are using mostly the Lightning Network, but once again, there's some abilities to change things up. And what people can do is they can send in micropayments to you. So for every minute, every bit that they were listening to you, they can continuously stream some money. So one of the cool things about this is you have the ability to create splits. And so what I can do and what I do is put in multiple different levels of splits for everyone who I think is deserving and helping of creating this podcast. So now for me, you might say, okay, Kyrin, but you're just an individual. You can just put in one and that'll be fine. But I actually want to help out other people who make this all happen. My co-host Juan, who I run the Mere Mortals with, not on this show, but on my main show, I guess. I like to include a joint wallet that we have as a split because the microphones that I'm using, the room, the sound panels, all the stuff that I've got going on here, he helped to pay for a large portion of that, or half of it exactly. So I want to include him on part of it. I want to include a extra person, as I do weekly, for 15%, who I think has really helped me out this week or is helping out the kind of ecosystem. I want to include the apps which give me services which really help me. And you will see this for this particular podcast. I've got one called Satoshi Stream. I've talked about them before, and they are really great for data collection and for being able to surface boosts and be able to connect to the Discord and all of these things which I just wouldn't be able to do myself. So when you are creating a podcast or when you're creating a piece of artwork or a music, and if you're in a band, there's probably going to be a minimum 3 or 4 people. And all of those people, if you are trying to monetize that, there's no real easy way to do it. You need complicated legal contracts. You need, so many industries have these non-productive middlemen who are there kind of solely to provide trust, I feel, in the best of cases. or who are restrict control while also charging you for it as well. And I think the music industry seems to be rife with this. I haven't had firsthand experience myself because I'm not a musician, but I know people who are musicians, and they say that the process of trying to put your music on Spotify or on Bandcamp or a large portion of these places, it just gets chewed out. They charge high fees, and what ends up happening is if you get 100,000 streams on Spotify, a big number in the podcasting equivalent, you would get $20 per thousand, so that'd be $2,000 if you just did standard advertising. If you do that on Spotify, you're not getting $2,000. You're getting a couple of dollars, maybe $20, maybe $100. Who knows? But it's significantly less. So I think one of the cool things that really is about this value tag and being able to put a way for people to pay you directly within your RSS feed is that it just cuts out so much of the kind of bullshit, and it can be done on a peer-to-peer basis. The people who want to pay you know that it's going directly to you. And this is really cool because this is basically micropayments. And I am slightly too young to know the full history of the internet. I was born in 1992, so I was coming up, I guess, with it in the 2000s. But it seemed that micropayments were this kind of golden thing. Everyone wanted to do it. Like, wouldn't this be amazing to do? And this would create better incentives for everyone. We would need, it just seems like something that would solve a lot of problems, but it was never actually implemented. And I was listening to Adam Curry not too long ago, and he was saying, this might be the first time micropayments has actually been done and is actually working. So very, very cool for that. The other thing I mentioned was everyone gets a piece of the pie. So the podcast app developers, hosts, if they want to get in on this, Blueberry, for example, you can use their functionality in on their dashboard, and they just ask for, I believe it's a 4% or 5% split. You can put in collaborators, you can put in additional services for statistics, you can put in charities. I mean, hell, you can even put in the listener back into it if you want. So what this does is it really, one, enables a lot of optionalities, and I think it aligns a lot of incentives, and it can cut out a lot of the kind of, I won't say bullshit, but I think just a lot of, we all know people who have a job where they have a ridiculous amount of time for that work, and they kind of only work 2 hours, 3 hours a day. I think if you can eliminate a lot of that chaff in the system, it makes for a better world. Now, let's get on to, I guess, the streaming aspect of this. So streaming sats, and this is the main use case we see now in podcasting 2.0, and we can see this across a variety of different apps. And so how this works is generally it's calculated in 1 minute intervals, though not necessarily sent being in 1 minute intervals. So batching occurs. So if you go onto the apps itself, you'll typically see down at the bottom of the screen, it'll have a little counter or a little circle near the play button or off to the side of that or something like that. And you can choose as the listener how much that you want to stream into your favorite podcaster. For me, myself, I like the 21 sats per minute because that's how many Bitcoin there are going to be. It's just a kind of symbolic number. And even after listening to this, I might change that because I've got some stats on here on how much that is actually worth. Once again, the micropayment aspect is kind of highlighting the microness of it. This is intended to be smallish amounts, but small can differ for different people. If a billionaire was listening into the podcast and they were streaming in 2100 sats per minute, that would still be relatively small for them in comparison to my perception of wealth. So we have this aspect here. Unlike subscriptions or paywalls, you're only paying for what you actually use. This is why micropayments are so cool and can help a lot of other systems which are in place. And you might say, okay, Kyrin, but there's other ways you can do this. You can do this through the Patreon model. And this is getting more to the value for value aspect. and getting closer to the heart of that, which is, I provide value for you upfront, and then you provide it back to me in whatever number and way that you want. Okay, well, this is beautiful for two different reasons. One, you get to choose the value that you send back to me, i.e. you get to choose how many Satoshis per minute you want to send to me. And it stops as soon as you stop listening, which is in contrast to something like Patreon, where you have to just pay and it just goes automatically and you've kind of paid for a month, I guess. So this is really getting to that aspect where, what if I only want to get 2 weeks worth of value out of this? What if I only want to listen to the show just to kind of test it out and see, do I actually like this show? And so I'm going to jump onto the GitHub for the podcast namespace. And Dave Jones created this thing, a little caption here called Play to Pay, which I think is really cool because it explains it quite nicely. So I'm just going to read this out. This system can be thought of as play to pay rather than the traditional pay to play paywall approach. When a media listener, such as within a podcasting app, presses the play button on an episode whose feed contains a value block, a compatible app will be expected to begin streaming micropayments to the designated recipients on a time interval that makes sense for the app. So it actually doesn't even need to be in these minute intervals, and I'll get onto that soon. The amount of each payment can be any amount the listener chooses, including zero. If the listener chooses not to pay to listen to this media, then the app can ignore the value block of that feed. And then he goes down on a little bit low. Payment intervals. The time interval for calculating payments is always 1 minute. However, the actual interval between when payments are sent can be longer. The interval should be chosen with a few factors in mind, such as connectivity. Is the app currently online? Transaction fees, batch payments together to reduce fee percentage, cryptocurrency network load. Can the given crypto network or API support this payment rate? So there's a couple of things related to that there, which were pretty much what I was highlighting. This does fit the value for value model more closely than something that takes a paywall approach. And it's accessible for people who are just coming in and who are just, they're a little bit uncertain. Do I actually like this content or not? And maybe when you're coming in for this first time, you could have the default as 0 because you're listening to a show and you only want to send it when you think it's worthy of sending. Now, what I actually really like about this as well is that it's rather passive and doesn't actually require active decision making to be made, while also allowing the listener to determine the amount. So this is classic V for V. And I think it's this passive part which is really interesting and intriguing, because when we look at the value for value model that is being done on something like No Agenda, for example, it does require a kind of bigger effort on an individual's part. Now, what they typically do on that show with this is Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak is they've done this largely through PayPal, and PayPal is good for one instance, and this is being able to set up recurring payments. And so you can have just this thing which will go every month and go, bam, do I want to send this to the show? Well, it doesn't even ask you. If you just set it up, it'll just automatically do it as long as you have enough money in your PayPal wallet or maybe even your bank account, and PayPal can work straight from there. I'm not actually sure. I don't use PayPal that often. And this is, once again, getting closer to the value for value, but the more passive aspect of it, which is if I was trying to decide each and every single time that I listen to a podcast, how much is this worth? How much do I want to pay? Is this show better than this other show? Should I send them this much? It's too much. It is too much overload. Whereas with this system, once again, you can just choose a number, and I've chosen my number, and I might change a different number in the future. But once I've chosen that, every show that I listen to from then on, it's just a constant streaming going in. I'm not having to make these active decisions, and the more active decisions are something like boostograms, which I'll save for the next episode in number 44. So getting onto another aspect of this, which is I think it's relatively simple on the surface, the micropayment aspect. I want to choose an amount of money to go to my favorite artist or content creator as I'm listening. And as soon as I stop listening, I want it to stop. I think that's pretty simple. I get to choose how much I want. and I can just kind of maintain this for as long as I want. Now, the complex thing is more on the application side, and this is more just of interest perhaps for people, which is there's so many different various ways that this could all that they have to make decisions. So this is the application, the podcast app that is that is receiving these micropayments and then passing them on, or enabling this, I should say. So, for example, if someone is listening to a show and they end up sending 545, so they listen for, X amount of time let's make this even easier. They have their streaming sat set at 54 per minute, and they listen for 100 minutes. So that's an hour and 40 minutes worth of content. They will have sent 540, but okay, the amount that is actually going to individual people in the value block, so this is in the actual RSS feed, how is that going to get divvied up? It's pretty easy. If there's just one in there, all 540 will go to that person, into that wallet. But what if there's two of them? Okay, well, I guess you could maybe have it as 270 going to each. Okay, what if there's four of them and they're equal splits? Okay, well, I guess 135. But you can kind of see how this could get into a point where it's like, if you have 100 different people all getting 1%, well, you can't divide 40 into 100. So like it without having micro portions. So at some point they're going to have to make some decisions of going, okay, well, this person is too low, so we're just going to send a rough amount of sats to these other people. Another case would be listening at 1.25 speed. Does the person who is streaming it in, do they expect this to be for the actual minutes of the show, or the actual minutes of how long they're listening, which will be shorter because they're listening at a faster speed? Or if you do the opposite version at 0.75 speed, what about in that case? You can also have mistakes in the podcaster side where you might not have things adding up to 100%. It might add up to 99% or 101. And we see this relatively often. How do we then divide that, have to do more recalculations? Then there's fees as well, which are probably something I want to just touch upon, because I heard someone on another show, a listener, being worried about the fees that are currently occurring. And the app developers are smart, and they make a lot of decisions, and they have to make these choices, and these are individual ones that they decide to. In this case, most of them are pretty smart, and so they will say, okay, the actual sending through on the minute basis is kind of hard, and it's going to rack up some fees. And so what they will typically do is they'll batch these payments. Now, I was chatting with some of them on the Mastodon instance, and there was kind of various things saying from, every 3 minutes they will send in a batched payment. I think some of them were slightly a bit larger than that, but almost certainly they do it as it's occurring. And so they're not just waiting until you finish listening to an episode and then sending it all in one big chunk, which I think could be done as well. I don't see any problems with that. But all of this is just, they're going to have to make their own choices. And so if you're, as a listener, a bit concerned about this, just know that it's incredibly complex. And so a lot is happening in this case. Now, there was a section here which I just wanted to touch upon, which was all of this at the moment is based on Lightning, but you could even hear it in that section I was saying with Dave Jones, that he had cryptocurrency network load. And so I'm just going to jump down here to the namespace again, and this is where it says supported currencies and protocols. The value block is designed to be flexible enough to handle most or any cryptocurrency and even fiat currencies with a given API that exposes a compatible process. Currently, development is centered mostly on Lightning, so this is the layer 2 of Bitcoin, using the KeySend method. KeySend allows for push-based payments without the recipient needing to generate an invoice to receive them. Another method to send spontaneous payments via Lightning is AMP, Atomic Multipath Payments. which supersedes KeySend in many ways and allows for robust and larger payments. However, it is still in beta and thus not widely implemented as of now. So we can definitely see, okay, this isn't even related to a Bitcoin thing. This can be anything. As he mentioned, it could be done with fiat. So this is actual US dollars or Australian dollars or Canadian dollars or Argentinian pesos or Colombian pesos. But not much of it is actually done through that because it's incredibly complex. This could have, we've had the ability to do this for a large while, but no one's actually implemented it. It's more through the digital money like Bitcoin, where it makes a lot more sense and it's actually doable. It can cross geographic boundaries, and there's not as many laws and restrictions and regulations related to the sending of money like there was if you wanted to send micropayments to your favorite Iranian podcaster and you're US based. I think that is going to be pretty impossible from what I gather. What we actually have seen is that there is room for more. So you can actually do this on the Hive blockchain. I wanted to give a small shout out to them. And this is because, one of the developers there, Brian of London, he made an active, difficult choice pretty much on his own to help implement this into podcasting. And we saw this with Podping, which is also using the Hive blockchain. So it does allow for other people to come in. This isn't just a Bitcoin thing. It's a micropayment thing, actually sending money, actually sending value. So that being said, it is mostly done on the Lightning Network, which is on Bitcoin. And I kind of tried to avoid highlighting that it's a Bitcoin thing, and because I think it can extend beyond that. But it is very much centered upon that at the moment. And I would just say that I find Andreas Antonopoulos to be a really great resource if you want to know more about what that is. He's probably the person I've learned the most about regarding Bitcoin as a whole, and then the Lightning Network as well, because he's very tech-based, but explains it in pretty simple and clear manners. He's got a book called Mastering the Lightning Network, which I have yet to read myself, but it's a very technical-based book. But I've heard good things about it, and I've listened to a lot of his podcasts, so I would just recommend that. So just getting onto the summary aspect, I suppose, of this. Direct peer-to-peer micropayments enable flexibility whilst being a passive activity for the listener consumer. I think this could be applied outside of podcasting as well. I'm pretty sure there are examples of people who have set this up in some sort of feed or reader that you use on the internet, where for every, let's say for a blog, as you're reading, the blog goes down, for each page scroll that you do, or perhaps for each paragraph where you go from one to the next, that is when your browser or whatever it is will automatically send in a micropayment to the recipient of that. It's very much the same thing. The podcasting version obviously is audio and is done on a minute basis, i.e., I've listened to this many minutes of a podcast. But you can do this for text, I'm going to send in a micropayment for this much of a text that I've read, this many paragraphs. So I think this can apply outside of just audio and video as well. There's no reason this can't be done with minutes of a video that you've consumed. So I think this is starting to go out to a broader example. And you actually can do this with video, for example. If you go onto any of the 3Speak feeds, which show up in podcast apps, which support the video version. So once again, going back to what is a podcast, typically it's an MP3, but you can have the video podcast version of that, which is an MP4. And you can do this. If you actually want to do this, you can type in Mere Mortals Podcast without any spaces in between that. And you will see a feed that I set up a long time ago on 3Speak, which has some clips that I've created. And these clips are much lower quality. I think I put them in 720p and try to make them relatively short as well. But you can send micropayments to that as well. So this does work for video. So it's not just a podcasting thing. Micropayments are actually working I think for the first time, as far as I'm aware, on the internet, and it's going to be very, very cool. No system is perfect, so if you are concerned about this, I would just say maybe don't use super big amounts, because it can be hard to know exactly how much has gone through to your favorite podcaster. But I do just want to say, so if you have it set at 10 sats per minute, which is equal to 600 an hour. If you're listening to an hour of content and send 600 sats at today's prices, that's about 12 cents in Australian dollars, which would probably be about 10 cents, 9 cents in US dollars. That's not a whole lot for an hour's worth of enjoyment that you got. I assume if you're listening to something for an hour, you would get, you're only paying 10 cents for that. Let's say you do that for the equivalent across let's say you're listening to 10 hours of podcasts a week. That's about $1. Is that something that you can afford, $1 a week for listening to content? Sure, that's awesome. And then the micropayments again. It matters very little on an individual. If someone sends me 10 cents, that's not going to change my life. But if 10,000 people sent me 10 cents, okay, well that's $1,000. That actually makes a difference. So you can kind of see where this can actually add up in the large scale of things, and so you can actually be supported as an artist, as a digital content creator, whatever you want to label yourself as, by a lot of people sending you a little bit amount of money. This is kind of the dream of crowdsourcing, right? Being able to do something like this. Now, typically, this changes because even in crowdsourcing models, it's usually you have this kind of power laws, the aspect of there'll be a couple of people who will donate the largest amounts, and kind of, the 20% of people will send in 80% of the value or the sourcing for that. That's probably always going to happen. That seems to be a natural law of the universe. It happens in galaxies and stars and matter and and light and all of this sort of thing. So I wouldn't try and fight against that too heavily. But I just do think this is really cool. And you can, so if you've been listening to this show will probably go for 45 minutes. If you send in what I typically do of 21 sats a minute, that's only going to be about 15 cents, something like that. So it's not crazy amounts of money. I think hybrid models using this will probably come into the future, which will probably trend slightly away from pure value for value in its purest form. But I think probably an enhancement over what we typically see nowadays. So for those who are just wondering, how does your typical Spotify money actually get divvied up? So there's about 220 million, I think, Spotify premium members, each paying, let's just say $9 $9 a month. Of that $9 a month, where does that money actually go? Well, a lot of it goes into the royalty fees for music. A lot of that will go to the top artists. And so they will get, so even if you're not listening to the Taylor Swifts, the Justin Biebers of the world, and you're focused solely on a niche like me, who listens to this one called Free Flow Flavor, and it's kind of a Japanese not hip hop, Japanese techno, drum and bass sort of music, which I use for my workouts. I love listening to that. They're a much smaller band, and even if I listen to them only exclusively, my money wouldn't go to them. It would go to someone else. So I think there's probably going to be some hybrid models in the future where it will have this aspect of, okay, if I spend $9 a month and I listen to these 10 different artists, it will do it based more on who the artist I'm actually listening to. But I think this value for value, the micropayment thing of it actually going to them in that time, in that real time aspect, has a quality to it, a uniqueness. Every morning I've got a Telegram chat, a Telegram bot set up, which lets me know real time when people are sending me in micropayments, and it is super cool because at any given moment I can just check it and it's like, oh yep, it's coming in. So I can actually even say there is someone listening to me right now who is streaming in some micropayments. I see value for value, 3 total payments, 45 sats. 3 total payments, 45 sats. And this is in the last 5 minutes of 10:13, 10:22, 10:27. So whoever that is that's listening in, thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. So very, very cool. I love it. I love this sort of thing. So yeah, I think just summing it all up, micropayments are going to play a larger portion of being able to support people on the internet. I think it creates some really interesting incentives. It enables people to be a lot more flexible with how they use their money and how it gets divvied up. And I think it will create some real big efficiencies of allowing us to not need to go through restricted parties or going through platforms which are there kind to only there for the aspect of trust. So yeah, I think it's really cool and definitely something that you should be looking out for, and not discounting a large portion of podcasting 2.0 and of getting podcasters onto this system is emphasizing this boost aspect. Like, wow, a boost comes in and it can be super big. But I think in one of the coolest things is that it's not even unnamed, you can see people's names, but it is kind of that support which maybe might not get recognized as clearly and cleanly. I am starting to do for the just mere mortals as a whole for tax purposes and things like this. I'm starting to keep a monthly, I suppose you'd call it a budget, or just keeping track of how much is coming in, and being able to report this to the Australian Tax Office. Yay. And what I can see here is for July of 2023, I had, let's see, how many sats come in. So there was about, across the various shows that I've got going on, I had about 336,000. And of that amount, there was 51,000 of that was via people just streaming in. So that's what, 1/7 of the total amount. And that is just a really cool thing to have come in. So it's, I would actually even love for that to be larger in the future. And yeah, so it's just very cool on that aspect. And I think it's going to change a lot of things. I am now going to get into the Boostagram Lounge, and I'm going to actually thank some people who have been supporting the show. So take it away, Mr. Adam Curry.
Welcome to the Value for Value Boostagram Lounge.
A Boostagram, for those who don't know, is a message that has been sent through one of these apps directly to the wallets, the address that I put in my RSS feed. And so this is different to the micro streaming because it enables people to actually give some feedback as well, a comment, a message that comes directly to me. So this can be very, very beneficial in many ways because I get some content for the show, and I get to actually directly thank the people who have been helping to support. So let's kick it off with the first here. So this is from Cole McCormick, the host of the America Plus. And he says, I understand the risk with advertising models, but I am leaning towards using and experimenting with them rather than demonize. Twitter seems like an opportunity that's different from YouTube or Instagram influencer, or YouTuber or Instagram influencer. Maybe I'm moving to the bad light. Someone help me. And then he sends in his favorite number, 5492 sats sent using Fountain. So this is just in reference to, I'm not even sure I talked about it particularly on this show, where I was saying with Twitter now enabling the people actually sending money to creators for helping to drive engagement, things on the platform. I was just saying, I could see this turning into a clickbaity sort of thing where you try and get people posting underneath your comments just to be able to, drive some outrage, something because it's based more on, I'm not necessarily sure it's based on value, but it's based on attention, which I don't think are the same things. And I think that can go some different ways, but I think his overall strategy is probably the best way to do it, which is, experiment, try these things out. Value for value, I think, is the best method of doing things. And when I experiment out, I want to try and come back into the critical aspect of it. So as I was talking about with those hybrid models, I think that strays away from value for value, the core principles of it. But they can be interesting nonetheless. And I would definitely say that just as in terms of a life principle, experimenting is very, very useful. And that was sent using Fountain, one of the apps which enable micropayments and boosting coming in. Actually, all of these were from Fountain this week. Another one here from Gene Bean. So this is the host of the Volunteer Technologist. I may be wrong, but I think one PeerTube instance can mirror content from another. If so, and if the Blueberry server you are in now is PeerTube, then you should be able to stay there and mirror to NATube. No idea if that's appealing, but wanted to mention it regardless. And then he sent through a 2 kilobyte boost, 2048, sent using Fountain. I honestly have no idea, mate. I'm just getting comfortable with the kind of live aspect, the technological aspect I'm at the moment. And I'm going to be working my way towards trying different ways of doing this. I might try some video, and if I was going to do it, I probably would not use YouTube, and I would try something like PeerTube. So this mirroring aspect and getting the stream onto different places, I'm not going to rush that. I was talking about that, I think, a couple of weeks ago in the live chat as well. At the moment, I've got a whole bunch of other things different to do. For example, I have 48 foam panels sitting on my desk in front of me, which need to go up on the walls to get rid of some of this reverb. So I've got all sorts of stuff to do. But thank you very much, Gene Bean. I'm definitely going to look into that. It's just at what point and when. We have McIntosh coming in. So this is the host of Generation Bitcoin. And he says, music V for V might be bigger than any of us, except Adam think it will be, Macintosh. And then he sent 2121 sats, sent using Fountain. So once again, the Bitcoin number there. And look, honestly, I think it'll be pretty big. I talked about this on one of the shows, and I might have neglected to mention it just in here. But I was talking about how I think these hybrid models will emerge. It was on episode 403 of the Mere Mortals podcast that came out. So if you want to know more about the hybrid models, and I was really getting into Spotify, and I have an open bet out there that I think Spotify will be bankrupt within 8 years. So if you're intrigued into what that is all about, I would recommend checking that out. But I think music value for value is going to be huge, and I'll probably be talking about that in about 2 to 3 weeks' time. I'm just going to focus more on the ascending of value, the monetary value at the moment, and then get onto how this is being implemented in some really cool ways, such as what Adam Curry is doing with Boostergram Ball. The final one I have here is from Gene Bean, again, coming in. He says, don't feel icky about Fountain advertising. It's a really great and non-shady model. A 1 kilobyte boost, 1024 cent. Using Fountain as well. I've changed my tune on that. It was my default is just to be skeptical of advertising. I was actually talking with my brother about this last night, and I was trying to explain to him the V for V and why I'm so big into it. And there's many different aspects that I try to explain it. One is I just personally don't like ads, and I feel like I've been tricked by ads in the past. Two is I think strategically relying on I think the censorship aspect of it plays a big part of it. The strategic aspect of only having 1 or 2 advertisers coming in, and if they get canned, and they're just a weak point, I guess. I would much rather be supported by 500, 1,000 true fans, that Kevin Kelly article. I would much rather be supported by 1,000 different people across the world in various aspects, all who can make their own individual decision making, rather than 3 advertisers who are very vulnerable to a couple of emails sent by people who dislike me and dislike the show and decide to not sponsor anymore. I think just strategically it's a risky position to be putting yourself in, much like if you build a business based on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. you don't control that medium, and so you can get kicked off at any point. You can get throttled with the algorithms. It's a tricky game. It's a tricky game and a risky game, I think, and it's a risk that I personally am not willing to take. Although it might seem that going all in on value for value might seem slightly risky to some people. I'm going to jump on to my tip section. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone who is streaming as well. It's very, very much appreciated. And that person who is streaming in live right now, I really do appreciate it. I want to give some tips at the moment. So one of the things that I noticed, and I've taken this from when I was listening to Flirting with Bitcoin, who I talked about the other week, but this is across a fair few shows as well, of only mentioning one service, and this service being Fountain. Like I was just mentioning, I think it's just good to be mindful of creating a community on only one app. The Stitcher app, for example, is closing down its service. The Damus app, which was used for Nostr, kind of got kicked off of the App Store. It's not hard to imagine the various ways that any of these things could go wrong. And having just that single point of focus of failure can be a problem, I think. What I've seen with this show is really great was it's not just Fountain. People are using other ways of supporting in, and I'll talk about all of these various apps in a second. But I would just say it is worth, at the very least, highlighting how other people can help support the show. So I would agree, Fountain is a really great app. It's my go-to at the moment, and it's got a great community there. But I would just say, just be mindful. If you're putting all your chips on one place, once again, it's just a risky aspect to do. So with the app and service highlight, I just wanted to give a reiteration of all the various different apps that you can use to do micropayments. So obviously, I mentioned Fountain. Another great one is Podverse, who I mentioned the other week as well. Some other cool ones that can do this are Customatic. I have yet to really use Customatic myself because I do not have that phone. I don't. That's only on iOS, so I don't have that phone myself. The Podfans, which at the moment is just on the web, but hopefully will be coming to a mobile app in the nearest future, is also able to do this. Podfriend can also do it. Curiocaster is a great one for the desktop. Podfriend is also on the desktop. They used to have I can't remember what it was, a mobile thing. We'll just say it's desktop at the moment. Pod Station also does the stat streaming. We also have another one called Breeze, which is mostly a Lightning wallet, but it does have podcast abilities in there. I'm going to throw this out there because it is doable with the Sphinx.chat. That's a really old one. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is there. And I'm just looking at something, and there's one thing called the value for value calculator, and I don't even know what this is. But if you're really interested in that, you can go onto there. But the main ones I would recommend are Fountain, Customatic, Podverse, Curiocaster, Podfriend. Those are probably, and Breeze, those are probably the big apps where you can do this streaming of sats, and they're ones which I have personally used. Customatic a long time ago when I had access to my brother's phone and could use that out, and Podfans coming up. So yeah, those are the apps where you can do streaming of Satoshis if you want. Let's jump onto my value for value section, and for this week, I'm going to give 15% to Dave Jones, the pod sage himself, for putting in a silly amount of effort to make this all happen. Those things that I was just reading off before of the specs, I believe they were written by him. So much of what he has done has been helping to create all this back-end infrastructure to allow all of this magic internet money to actually be sent back and forth. He also wrote Helipad, which is a service for you that lets you see, export, collate the streaming of sats and boosts. I personally use Fountain and Satoshi Stream and Get Albi, a combination of them. All of them, I can see the amount, the boostograms, but then also the streaming of sats coming in. But if you want a more self-hosted version, you can also go through his Helipad It's not even a service. You don't have to pay for it or anything. It's just free software that is out there and that you can use. So very, very cool, and much appreciation to Dave Jones. So what is my final request? Well, one of the things that you could do is you could up your streaming amount here. So, what value do you put on this show? If you had 100 sats per minute at 45 minutes, that's about $1 for an episode. So for the last 45 minutes, was that worth it for you? Did you get $1 worth of $1 worth of value? So that's, I think, 67 cents US, something like that, out of this podcast. If so, set it at 100 sats per minute. If it's a little bit less, if it's a little bit more, or a lot less or a lot more, in either case, I really am appreciative of people sending in these small amounts, and it gives me a kick of joy every time that I go onto that Telegram app and I just see, okay, someone is streaming sats in through at this very moment. It's so cool, and I can still see that they're still doing it at this very moment. So I really, really do appreciate that. Just in terms of value for value as well, there's many different apps. I just listed off a whole portion of them. If you don't want to do it in a monetary form, letting someone know about these cool different things. If you are a podcast fan and you know a podcaster personally, or if you are a podcaster and you want to know how to do more of this, reach out to me via any of the links in the show notes, and I'm more than happy to help guide you into how to do this. It is relatively simple, and there are ways of doing this now which you can do within five minutes. It's not a hard process. If you have some talent, if you know more about the streaming of sats, if you know any examples of micropayments working in the past for other services just across the internet, not even podcasting related, I would love to know about that. Some historical history, things like this, and you feel I've done a misservice by not talking about them, I would love to know those things. Please boost that in is the best way of doing that, but also just reaching out to me. So very, very cool micropayments. I think they are going to be a big aspect of the future. And yeah, I do just want to thank everyone for tuning in for this one today. And I will be back once again next week at the same time, 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, until the next time, ciao for now. Kyrin out.